Good afternoon, my Real News Midday TV family. Welcome back to the channel for another news update for October 31, 2023. And in the news this afternoon, DSP in disbelief as the earthquake thought becomes reality. Deputy Superintendent of Police Justin Woolcock got the shock of his life yesterday when less than an hour after he arrived at the Supreme Court and had earlier wondered whether the nearby car park would be able to withstand an earthquake, he found himself experiencing one of the biggest tremors of his life. The senior police officer in charge of administration at the Kingston Western Division was among scores of Supreme Court staff, police officers, judges, lawyers, and attendees who had hastily assembled in the courtyard after the tremor had subsided. Emotions were palpable, many persons were seen, obviously shaken, and some were even in tears. A few were overcome by the Spirit, with one speaking in tongues, as another expressed gratitude to God for His mercies. Recounting his experience, DSP Woolcock said he was at a loss that earlier that morning he had a thought about an earthquake, and it came to pass. It was just a random thought based on the number of floors in the car park and the number of cars that are stocked. I just wondered whether the building would be able to withstand an earthquake, he said. Asked what was his initial reaction to the 5.6 magnitude earthquake, Woolcock said, "Shock, I just couldn't believe that my thought materialized." According to the officer, who has been in the force for 20 years, the tremor is the strongest he has felt in a while. "Sometime in the late 90s I felt something of this nature," he said. Attorneys at law Ernest Davis and John Jacob, who both dashed from courtroom 2 after being surprised by the massive tremor, echoed similar sentiments, noting that it was the largest earthquake they had experienced. While Jacob said it was a shocking experience, Davis said it did not last long enough to scare him. A court clerk, 27, who was spotted on the outside making phone calls to her relatives to ensure everyone was safe, said that it was the first time she was experiencing such a disaster. She said she was inside the courtroom about to start a trial when the tremor started, and she immediately sat down in her seat as she knew it was an earthquake. "I never felt one before. I'm normally busy, but I'm feeling a bit traumatized and shaken up by this one," she added. The earthquake later resulted in an early adjournment of all the court cases, including the trial of Portland businessman Everton Beach's Stout McDonald and Oscar Barnes. The trial will continue today. Chief Justice Brent Sykes, who was seen milling about the crowd which gathered on the outside, said the event presented an opportunity for the courts to shore up its preparation. "What this does is reinforce the need for us to have our disaster drills in place, and with this real-time experience, there are still some things we have to work on, so we will be reviewing that and preparing to handle it better. Because when you have simulation and the drills, many persons take it seriously, but some don't. But this was the real thing, so happily it is not more serious. So we will take the lessons learned from this and incorporate it into our drills," he said. In the meantime, he credited the staff and those who were in attendance for following the protocol and exiting the court after the tremor. While persons waited on the outside, the registrar was heard on the microphone giving instructions for persons to remain where they are as the checks were being made to account for everyone who was inside before the building was thoroughly checked and the persons were allowed back inside. Meanwhile, Deputy Superintendent in charge of the facilities at the Supreme Court, Alfred MacDonald, reported that all the prisoners were safe and accounted for, as well as their holding area. In terms of the building, he said only 2 courtrooms suffered minor structural damage to the roof. Dancehall artist Golly has died. Dancehall artist Golly is dead, the entertainer's pastor said on Tuesday. Pastor Chris Tate of El Shaddai Prophetic Ministries told the news that the entertainer passed away at the Kingston Public Hospital on Monday. Golly, whose real name is Robert Lee Malcolm, was said to have been suffering from a kidney disease for the past few months and was admitted to the hospital where he had been receiving treatment. Golly rose to fame in 2014 with his catchy track Body Specialist. A video recording of him DJing the track on the streets went viral on social media, paving the way for him to the studios in a rags to riches story that captivated Jamaica. His meteoric rise to stardom led to him being the closing act on Sting in December 2014 at the height of his short-lived career. Towards the end of his life, Bob was reportedly rendered homeless once more. An appeal was made back in August by social media philanthropist Donna Go, more popularly known as Auntie Donna, for persons to assist the entertainer who had fallen on hard times and had been extremely ill. Beach Stout stays put during Quake. Businessman Everton Beach Stout MacDonald remained in a prisoner dock in a home circuit courtroom in Kingston on Monday morning, while lawyers, police, and others scampered for safety as a 5.6 magnitude earthquake shook the island. Beach Stout and his co-accused Oscar Barnes are facing trial for the July 20, 2020 murder of Tonya MacDonald, who was the businessman's wife. While lawyers and others inside the courtroom awaited the judge's arrival for the continuation of the trial, the walls and the furniture vibrated heavily. As people dashed for the exit of the courtroom, trying to force themselves through a narrow doorway, all at once, Beach Stout stayed put in the dock, watching the proceedings. Police personnel in the courtroom also sought haven, but immediately after the shaking subsided, cops rushed to handcuff Beach Stout before whisking him out of the courtroom. Chief Justice Brian Sykes, who was in another courtroom, told the journalist that he reacted to the tremor by going on the furniture. Earthquake leaves thousands of Jamaicans without electricity. Thousands of Jamaicans were left without electricity for an extended period on Monday, following the magnitude of 5.6 earthquake which rocked the island. Traffic was reduced to a crawl in the corporate area as the stoplights at several major intersections went black. In a media release, the Jamaica Public Service confirmed that the earthquake had affected power supply to 132,000 of its customers in the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew, St. Catherine, Manchester, and St. James. The light and the power company said electricity to customers outside the corporate area were restored within a few minutes and to people in Kingston and St. Andrew in phases during the day. The JPS said several of its power generating units and the power delivery system in the corporate area were impacted by the earthquake. The affected power plants, which belong to both JPS and independent power producers, were West Kingston Power Plant and the Jamaica Private Power Company, Rockfort, and Huntsby, the company said. JPS said that some of its workers were temporarily displaced due to damage to its administrative and operations buildings, but the company did not provide details. This will impact response time to customer calls. Customers are therefore urged to make reports via the JPS mobile app and to contact the customer care center only in the case of emergencies until further notice, added the company. At the same time, the company said it was continuing its assessment of the overall damage to its infrastructure. More earthquakes are likely, expert warns. Jamaicans are being warned that more tremors are possible following the magnitude 5.6 quake on Monday. The earthquake unit of the University of the West Indies has reported that it recorded at least 23 aftershocks. Professor Simon Mitchell, former head of the earthquake unit and a professor of sedimentary geology at the UWI, said the 5.6 magnitude quake was about 8 times as strong as the tremors felt earlier in the year. Professor Mitchell, speaking with the news, said there is uncertainty regarding what is happening along the fault line between Haiti and Jamaica, which could see an even bigger earthquake.
I would like to hope that the stress has been released by this movement. But the trouble is, on the movement on a fault like this, it could actually set more stress up on another fault, and that could move and give us a bigger earthquake. What I would say is we have to be prepared that we could see something, because we've now had 3 reasonable-sized earthquakes in a relatively short period of time. Now, hopefully that won't be the situation, but it could be. We have to be prepared because we could see more earthquakes at the present point in time, so simply because of what we're seeing is going on. Well, I think that everybody has to be aware that this is a situation that we are actually sitting at the moment, and we've now had 3 reasonable-sized earthquakes in the space of a few months, and that is relatively unusual for Jamaica.
Opposition urges government to assess the country's emergency response mechanism following earthquake. Opposition spokesperson on local government, Natalie Nita Garvey, is calling on Minister of Local Government Desmond McKenzie to examine what she describes as the obvious failure of the country's disaster response mechanisms led by the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management following Monday's earthquake. In a statement Tuesday morning, Nita Garvey alleged that the country did not receive any communication from the ODPEM until late Monday evening after the magnitude 5.6 earthquake. She emphasized that the Disaster Risk Management Act, which was passed in 2015, entrusted the office with significant responsibilities in Jamaica's disaster preparedness and emergency response management. The principal purpose of the ODPEM is to advance disaster preparedness and emergency management measures by facilitating and coordinating the development and implementation of integrated disaster management systems and instituting measures to mitigate disasters, Nita Garvey said. She stated that for up to 6 hours after the earthquake, there was no sign of activity from the ODPEM, and there was no evidence of any coordination of first responders whose duty is to provide efficient responses. She went on to commend the Jamaica Constabulary Force, Fire Brigade, public hospitals, and the Jamaica Public Service Company workers, who the opposition spokesperson said worked tirelessly under difficult circumstances to restore normality. Nita Garvey expressed a concern that due to the failure to coordinate the agencies and present accurate preliminary reports, the country experienced the spectacle of the Prime Minister informing the country that damage was minor, while reports of infrastructure and housing damage and the school closures were being broadcast by media. As a result, she is calling on McKenzie to ensure that the country's response mechanism is thoroughly reviewed and the steps taken to correct all weaknesses that may prevent ODPEM from fulfilling its mandate according to law, as the Jamaican people expect no less, the statement said.